Welcome again to What I Did Next from A&T Media. I'm Malak Fuad. I welcome a new guest from the region on each episode, and we take a deep dive into their lives' most pivotal moments. On today's episode, Dr. Mounir Neamatalla tells me about his groundbreaking work that aims to strike a balance between development, social responsibility, and the environment.
This, for me, was like a religion. I believed that if you establish solid relationships with your natural and physical environment, solid relationships with communities, and if you establish solid relationships with your past, present, and future, you appreciate your heritage, that together these are formulas for creating magical results. You can literally combat a lot of the social problems and create a lot of opportunities for entire communities.
Dr. Mounir Neamatalla is a pioneering environmentalist and founder of Environment Quality International, EQI, which he founded in 1981. Starting out as the first environment-focused advisory company in Egypt, EQI also became a pioneer in the world of microfinance. In 1996, Dr. Mounir's visit to the remote oasis of Siwa led to the launch of the Siwa Sustainable Development Initiative, a flagship program that is addressing economic, cultural, and environmental challenges in that remote desert enclave. My conversation with Dr. Mounir was special for a number of reasons. He is an old family friend, and I have long admired his philosophy on life and how he sees the world. He's been on my podcast wish list since the show's inception, but he kept resisting my request to come on and share his story. That's until now. Dr. Mounir has all the characteristics of what is fast becoming a bygone era. He's a romantic, a dreamer, a deep thinker, choosing the slower, measured approach over today's fast and frenetic pace. He has also long espoused the virtues of living as one with nature and doing all we can to maintain an equilibrium with our surroundings. This approach has become essential in our battle against climate change and many of the ecological problems we face today. Let's start with Dr. Mounir's early years in 1940s Egypt.
I must say I had a very beautiful childhood. My mother was the youngest of four girls. And when she fell in love with my father and married him, he was quite a few years older than she was, but it was a love affair. The condition precedent that my grandfather put, my mother's father, was that they would live with him in the same home. So I grew up with my grandparents and my parents, and later my two younger sisters, Layla and Mona, who are now literally a very, very important part of my life. And during that journey, my grandfather was a politician. He was vice speaker of the parliament, representing the Sadist party. So he was, when I was born, the party was in power in Egypt. He had an open house where politicians from all walks of life used to come. So I grew up in an atmosphere where inclusion was the guiding principle, at least in the home that my grandfather provided us. And from my father's side, it was discipline. He was a disciplinarian par excellence, a loving disciplinarian. And from my mother's side, it was love. So this is the envelope in which I grew up.
And when you say your father was a kind disciplinarian, was that with you only as the only boy or with the three of you?
My sisters didn't get to know my father as well as I knew him. My sisters were very young when my father died. I would say if I go back to some of the important things that, because some of the important things that my father instilled in me, and I don't say told me, instilled in me. He was very much had a penchant for higher values.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if I'd ever act in a manner that wasn't appropriate with one of the staff at home, he would immediately draw my attention to that and say, listen, whenever you talk to one of the staff members, remember that you could have been one of them and somebody else is talking to you. And I've never forgotten
Yes,
that.
yes.
And that stayed with me all my life.
And it's an important lesson, actually.
It has evolved to be one of my guiding
Mm-hmm.
principles. I'm just going to cite another one, for better or for worse. He always used to tell me, look far, don't look under your feet, but do watch your step as you move. That also stayed with me. I have a great deal of difficulty not looking far in any decision making I make.
You are now known, of course, as somebody who pioneered the concept of sustainability and development in Egypt and in the wider region. How did this come to you as a young man as a possible direction in life?
I wish I could tell you that it was a conscious choice I made. It wasn't. It was an accident. I got educated in the realm of the 60s with a focus of engineering. When you did well in school, you went into engineering, studying chemical engineering, getting my undergraduate degree in America, then my graduate studies in the realm of engineering, had finished almost all my lab work to begin writing my dissertation.
Also engineering
In
based.
chemical engineering. I began thinking, what will I do after? All I could see is choices that I didn't feel comfortable with. I wasn't about to teach in university because I'm not a teacher. And quite frankly, if you speak about a year of resistance to sit with you in this interview, it's because I really try and shy away from any kind of public appearances. So can you imagine having to go and lecture? It's for me difficult.
Yes.
It's not an easy.
You're not comfortable in that
No,
way.
I'm not comfortable as a public speaker.
Yes.
Or as teaching was not a choice. Then working for a research institution was not a choice. I didn't want to spend my life in a laboratory. Working for sorry to say that, nothing wrong with the oil industry or the chemical industry, but it wasn't me. So I didn't see a career path.
When you say the oil industry, of course, at the time, that was a very attractive sort of job. Did you have a moral stance against it?
No,
or
no.
Okay.
It wasn't. I mentioned the oil industry. What had an even a great deal of attraction was the chemical industry.
Right.
Call it Dow Chemicals, Monsanto, Union Carbide.
Of course.
All these were where I saw the opportunities, and I wasn't tempted by them. And to be able to afford my apartment, I had to work. I responded to an advert by a blind professor, Professor Helmut Schutz. And the advert, the professor needed someone to be his eyes. He had lost his eyesight in the laboratory. He was a brilliant scientist. Actually, I owe him the larger part of my education, because spending time with him, reading his papers, having him edit what I would read to him, going through this cycle on a daily basis for a few hours a day was the best of possible educations I could have gotten in the realm of science. Anyway, when I had this phobia I went to Professor Schultz and I said, Professor Schultz, I don't think I want to continue with my degree. And he said, listen, you've invested a lot in your education. And I had, because I spent a lot of time, I did spend a long time in school.
And it was also a time where it was difficult for people from Egypt to go to the US for education.
Correct. When I had this conversation with Professor Schultz, he said that you've made a big investment in this, in science, and it would be a pity to lose it all now. Let me think about it. That's what he said. A week or so later, he said, Monir, how about environment? And it was him who hit that spot when he said, how about environment? I could feel light in my entire existence.
How interesting, Mounir.
It was as if I saw the trajectory of my life.
You know what's interesting as well, because at the time, correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't a discipline, was it?
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't.
I had to be shuttled from different schools, be it urban planning, public health. I just went through what you would call a multidisciplinary program. They were hard pressed to find me a thesis topic. We found a thesis topic. I finished and I got.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
This is why I mentioned that this man, Professor Schultz and Mr. Bubels and my parents, friends, so on, life is a mixture of blessings.
And luck, right?
And luck.
And a lot of serendipity, because he was already in your world, but he came up with an answer that you hadn't considered.
Exactly. Yes. I was lost.
Exactly.
I was lost. It's
fascinating how that happened.
And it was instant.
The light bulb went off for you.
Yes. And when you come to think about it, he thought about it profoundly. And this is really a big lesson in life. You should always not just think of yourself. You should always think of others.
Absolutely.
And he thought, he thought this young man that has been working with me for so long, I need to help him. And he gave it a lot of thought. And this is probably the initiation of my adulthood.
What was your PhD thesis on?
Well, really a boring subject. I don't want to bore you.
But it was environment related.
It was environment related, of course. It was what I would call, in Thomas Hardy's words, a labored contrivance just to get the degree.
Just to get it done. And it took you a long time?
In the process of this change, I must have spent an extra 3 years.
Okay.
But student life was beautiful.
Student life is very nice. And I hear as well that you loved living in New York.
Yes, I did.
So we're talking the early 70s now?
We're talking early to mid 70s.
Yes. So my parents were also there at the time, and my aunt. And so it was, from what I hear from them, it was a fun and crazy time.
Yeah.
When we come back, Dr. Mounir tells me about his return to Egypt and setting up EQI. That's after this break. Welcome back. You're listening to What I Did Next and my conversation with Dr. Mounir Neamatalla. Before the break, he was telling me how much he enjoyed living in New York.
I had established such a bond, such a network of friendships. It was another home.
Yes.
And leaving New York was not easy, that rupture, because, and I used to dream of Manhattan detaching from the mainland and docking in Alexandria.
That's so funny.
Yes.
How fascinating. And you had that much of a contact with the city.
It happened. It did detach from the mainland, and dock in Alexandria when we started Siwa, because all of Manhattan began coming.
That's right.
And I re-established contact with Manhattan.
You have a big American
yes, we
clientele.
Do have, from all four corners of the world, but New York fares. There are a lot of New Yorkers. And actually in the first year 2000, the millennium year, when we first opened, part of the launch and the echo, of Siwa was because guests from Manhattan came and they began talking about Adragamala.
So you returned to Egypt. Did you immediately begin your company EQI?
Yes, I did.
Tell me about that. What was the thinking behind EQI?
EQI stands for Environmental Quality International. Uh, uh, since I'm the founder, I guess I chose the name. The name was chosen intentionally to coin some of the important things that I thought should guide my evolution. First venture into establishing this company, because I didn't have, I had very little money, although I came from a grandfather was a very wealthy man, but circumstances had that without a father,
you were starting on your own.
Starting completely on my own. The logical thing to start with was the provision of advisory services. It didn't require any investment.
That's right.
It just required thought.
So it's a consultancy at the beginning.
Exactly, advisory services.
Yes.
And the first initiative, and you spoke about luck, the saying that goes, a square meter of luck rather than a hectare of competence.
Well, I didn't know that expression.
It's an Egyptian saying. So the first project we landed coincided with the first urban development initiative investment between the Egyptian government and the World Bank. And that first Egypt development project had in it a component to upgrade the Manshayat Nasser main settlement. It was the first community upgrading initiative to be launched in Egypt. Of course, the World Bank had engaged in others elsewhere in the world, and they thought that this would be worthwhile for Egypt, because this was the beginning of the expansion of informality. Informal settlements.
Informal settlements.
Exactly. And this was one of the ways to basically deal with this trend. Now, next to the main settlement in Manshayat Nasser, which is huge, was a smaller settlement where the garbage collectors of Cairo resided, the Zabbalin settlement.
The Zabbalin area, yes.
So we managed to tag on the Zabbalin settlement, and EQI was charged with the upgrading of the Zabbalin settlement. And that was the first important, you mentioned about transitions in life, the first important initiative we undertook.
It's also a milestone project in Egypt in its own right.
Correct. And we, over the years, over the first, I should say, 10 years of our existence, I'm speaking now late 70s until mid to late 80s, EQI was so heavily engaged. We had expanded the tapestry of partnerships to include the Ford Foundation, Oxfam, and of course the Egyptian government. The Cairo governorate was omnipresent throughout. But we then literally mastered the art of creating partnerships.
I hadn't realized, actually, how much EQI was an innovator in the microfinance sector. And I know that your nephew, Mounir Neamatalla, was very much involved with you at some point in EQI, perhaps at this phase, and now, of course, has gone on to take it into the digital world.
If I can just be a little bit more personal, I do not have any children. Monir was named after me, and Monir has surpassed all my expectations. He started while he was a student working with me. He spent 9 years after he got his master's degree working with me, all in the domain of microfinance. And from day one, I saw, although at that time I didn't understand, I saw that he had an interest. Why? I couldn't really figure it out. But all that time, mulling in his brain was the money that could be made, and the money and the investments that could happen, and the benefits that could, the economic benefits that would ensue in an ever expanding domain.
Like a ripple effect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he saw that.
Yes.
When he saw that, he came to me and he said that he wants to take it in the private domain because the law was being drafted at the time, and already there had been some entrants which we helped
Yes.
institute. So he said, why are we just helping everyone? We should be doing it. Now, he did it. And he did it in an impressive manner.
Absolutely.
That superseded all my expectations.
Absolutely.
Which takes me to the point, I sensed that you wanted to know more about the person, not just...
Of course. It's because I think the two
we are very
complement each other.
different, Monir
Yes.
and myself.
Yes.
Monir is a businessman. I am not a businessman. Once, out of the blues, he just spontaneously said, Doc, I don't know what you're about. You're an artist.
Yeah.
I said, thank you for the compliment. I would love, to be an artist. I don't think I am an artist, but he sees me as an artist. I'm really an artist and a dreamer. And if I can qualify myself, one of my biggest joys is when my dreams come true. So I dream at night, and during daytime, I work on realizing my dream. And I have no fear of realizing my dreams.
Yeah.
I am not a businessman because I may often make the wrong business decisions, but anything that, and that's my good fortune, anything that we've engaged in as a private institution has improved the quality of life for us and for the areas, the people that work around us, has had a strong socio-economic impact.
You can hear more about EQI's initiatives and impact in the world of microfinance on our bonus episode, which will come out next week. After the break, Dr. Mounir tells me about his involvement with the community in Siwa and his world-renowned eco-lodge, Adrer Amelal. Welcome back. You're listening to What I Did Next, and we're continuing my chat with Dr. Mounir Neamatallah. Explain to me a little bit what Siwa was when you first went, in terms of what it meant to you and why you saw potential there.
As I mentioned earlier, we were providing advisory. We're in the domain of provision of advisory services. Knowledge was there. Capabilities, staff capabilities were there. But boredom found its way in my life. As you grow, you no longer are master of your own destiny. So in the domain of advisory services, I found that EQI was competing for projects, was responding to the desires of others, to the point where the relationship between me and myself was disturbed. I felt we were losing our path.
Did you feel, sorry, Mounir, I want to press you on this point. Is it because you were no longer involved in the day-to-day of the business, or because the company had grown and you had too many projects running at the same time?
It's because the company had grown and the top priority was to ensure that the company was healthy,
Of course.
and that people were paid.
Yeah.
And I began losing sight of why I am in the domain of sustainable living.
It became a business.
It became
In
a
the wrong
business which I did not want to do.
Yes.
So I didn't want to literally be working to realize the desires of others.
I understand.
At that point in time, I said to myself and shared with my colleagues, if there is any value in the advice we're giving, then we should be invested in it. It's not just talking about it. And I was looking for a place where the concept of sustainable living could literally be seeded and could grow, because I believed this for me was like a religion. I believed that if you establish solid relationships with your natural and physical environment, solid relationships with communities, and if you establish solid relationships with your past, present, and future, you appreciate your heritage, that together these are formulas for creating magical results. You can literally combat a lot of the social problems and create a lot of opportunities for entire communities. And I began looking for a place to begin doing that. And quite frankly, I was looking at the Sinai. I was looking at the west coast of the Red Sea. That's where everybody was heading, talking about the mid-90s.
Yes.
And in a meeting, a young anthropologist who had been working in Siwa with us, we had some small initiatives in Siwa in the early 80s, mentioned Siwa. And immediately, just like the story with Professor Schultz, I said, Siwa, a fragile ecosystem right in the middle of the desert with a parallel existence. I hadn't been to Siwa, but immediately I knew about Siwa.
It's interesting how your instinct and your gut has guided you along the way. You felt it and you knew that this was a good direction for you.
It was instant. At that, when Naila mentioned Siwa, a few weeks later, I had a whole mission assembled, and we went to Siwa, traveled the desert, and when I got there, it was arriving there. I began about 30, 40 kilometers from Siwa, began looking at Herodotus' writings, the histories, 2 volumes. I knew Herodotus had traveled to Siwa, and began looking at the passages
that related
that related to Siwa. When we just went through the curve and entered Siwa, and 2 things caught my eye: the flat-topped white mountain at Raramillal, and the old town, the old fortress of Shali. And it was instant again that if we were ever to engage in Siwa, we're going to have to be engaged in these 2 areas. And we did. So the journey was, again, a chance occurrence. The rewards were immense. If I may say that some of the most beautiful years of my life was in this cycle of engagement, which continues to this day.
I read somewhere it took you 15 years approximately to get it up and running in terms of what we see today.
Let me just underscore a very important belief that I have. You initiate actions, but actions have a life of their own. as long as I am living, my engagement will continue. And what we started some 27, 20 years ago, or some 30 years ago, will evolve slowly but surely, hopefully in the right direction. Being slow is very important. Not rushing things is very important, especially when you deal with issues of life and work and the relationship between humans
Yes.
and their surrounding environment. If you rush it, you can fall flat on your face. We should not projectize our existence.
It's a very good
We
point.
should always be looking around us, because always listening around us, because with every step we take, there are echoes. And it is that discerning eye and that desire to see and listen and capture what's around you that guides you to the next stage. And we've been going through this exercise. I've had personally the privilege to go through this exercise in Siwa. And if I can take it elsewhere, I certainly will, but the story of Siwa is not finished yet. It hasn't yet reached what I would call a stage where it can be a lighthouse or a good example of sustainable living. There's more to do. And in getting it done, we need to work more on establishing new partnerships with public institutions, with other private institutions, with research institutions. And this is what I'm preoccupied with now.
You're trying to plan for the future of Siwa.
Look, Malak, nothing is done by one man.
No, of
or
course.
one woman.
Of course.
The big lesson I've learned in my life is to be always thinking of the other as I engage in whatever I do, because it is in this co-creation that great value is created. The big problem that faces a lot of initiatives, or that stands in the way of a lot of initiatives, is the lack of recognition of the importance of sharing, of engaging others, and I mean from the smallest to the largest, from the most ignorant to the most knowledgeable. You have to be always ready to capture whatever comes your way, and be able to have the courage to change course when it's necessary to change course. Otherwise, you fall into the trap of your ego being superimposed on the natural environment. When you work with nature, it's another story. You have to be listening to nature, because in nature, there is the biggest wealth in the world. And it is not just about digging it out, it's about finding it and harnessing it and being and creating a communion between you and your surrounding environment. We're trying our best to do this in Siwa.
You know, Mounir, the entire discussion we've had, there's been an underlying thread that has not been vocalized, and that is humanity. Everything you've spoken about goes back to that. The need to be humane with one another, and seeing all the work through that prism. We're talking about people at the end, where their interest is paramount. And that seems to be, to me, the underlying thread of your work, whether it's the origin of EQI, where you're working with communities, whether it's microfinance, whether it's Siwa, that is the thread connecting it, as far as I can see. Would you consider that to be where you've had the most impact?
It's very difficult for me to speak about the impact we've had. That is best said by others. What I know for sure, that I found fulfillment in my work by being true to what you just said. But may I add that love and appreciation for all what surrounds us, not just people, is very important.
Yes.
It pains me when I see the vision of an artist or a developer superimposed on a natural environment without regard for that environment.
Absolutely.
And I really think if would like to see or would like to claim that anything I've done in my life has had an impact, is to see a shift in thinking where we begin looking at our surroundings and natural environment as we look at other people and at ourselves.
Can I ask you for one more question, which is just to get a sense of your cultural life? How do you relax? What do you enjoy on a cultural level?
Well, let's not make it complicated.
No, let's not.
And let's not make it conventional
Okay.
either. First and foremost, I enjoy the company of friends. And for me, a conversation around a lunch or dinner table is a priceless gift that I highly appreciate and look forward to. I also love a little bit to inject in my life time for daydreaming. So I daydream. I dream at night, I daydream, and as I said earlier, this is what helps me in my work. But to daydream alone is rather lonely. So the company of books is most welcome. And reading the thoughts of others, reading the creations of others, gives me enormous comfort and enormous reason for life. The other aspect which I cannot help but enjoy is appreciation of beauty of all kinds. And for that, I've had the good luck to be able to catch the beauty around me and edit out whatever ugliness exists.
I love that.
Okay.
I love that. That's a wonderful way to end, Mounir. Thank you so much for being with me. I hope you enjoyed the conversation.
The one regret I have is I didn't do it a year ago.
Not at all. It was not meant to be a year ago, right?
Okay.
It's all about luck and timing. That was my episode with Dr. Mounir Neamatalla, pioneering environmentalist and founder of EQI. If you're a member of the show, you'll get a bonus episode next week with Dr. Mounir, where we talk more about EQI's microfinance program and how his work in Siwa led to a sustainable development project in El Hala, Saudi Arabia. You can find extended clips from our episodes on YouTube and connect with us on Instagram, X, and on LinkedIn. Just search for What I Did Next. Thank you for joining me today. You've been listening to What I Did Next from ANT Media. I'm Malak Fuad, and the show is produced by Chirag Desai. See you all in a couple of weeks' time.